Good morning, 7:17. It is Sunday morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm up early. I really wanted to do this video for the questions from last week in 7:17. I wanted to do it during the week. And things happened this last week that just made that impossible. As a church, we went through the unbearable pain of burying a 4-month-old baby. And that really was where our focus was for the week. And so to have enough time to make the video this week just didn't work out. But I really long to answer the questions from this last week. They're very important questions, good questions. And so, and we have students right now in Destin, Florida, Fort Walton Beach, Destin area, on their annual student trip to the beach in Florida. And I really wanted to make a video so that they would have something to talk through as they're doing Bible studies together and ministering together. Some of them were the ones that sent in the questions. So I want to do the video this morning. It's 4 o'clock Sunday morning. And so here we are. And so here's some of the questions, because this last week we talked about what happens to someone when they die. One person texted the question, what does the Bible mean then by sleep? And the answer is that the body sleeps when it is buried. That's the reason we bury people the way we do. We put them in a casket. We bury them in the ground. We bury them facing the east because the tradition has been from the biblical reference by Jesus that out of the east he will come. And so there's always been this Christian tradition to bury individuals in a casket facing east to where their body is sleeping, awaiting their awakening from rest by the appearance of their Savior out of the east. So this has been a long-term tradition in the church. It is not necessary to bury someone that way. It's more emblematic or symbolic to say to the world, hey, our Savior's coming back, and this body's resting right now, but will one day rise and look face to face in the eyes of their Savior. So the soul, immediately upon death, goes into the presence of Christ. And as to what they will experience, there's some mystery there, but we believe that Paul said, absent from the body, present with the Lord. So the body is laid to rest. You've heard that phrase before. We buried this individual and laid them to rest. So the body is resting. The soul is in the presence of Jesus Christ immediately. That's why when Jesus says to the thief on the cross, this day you will be with me in paradise, he really means that this very day when you die, your soul will enter into paradise. But the thief was laid in a tomb, just like Jesus was, or his body was probably dumped somewhere, honestly. But his body is at rest, his soul is in the presence of God. And that's what Paul was saying, absent from the body, body's at rest, present with the Lord, soul immediately in joy with God. So that's the first question someone had, is what does the Bible mean by sleep? And it means that the body is sleeping, the soul is in the presence of the joyful experience of the Savior. Second question then is related to this, is what about cremation? Should we not cremate because the body should be at rest, facing east as it were symbolically? And the answer to that is the early church suffered enormous persecution. Millions of believers, the first 300 years of Christianity, were killed because they refused to bend a knee to the emperor who was worshipped as a god. They refused to say that the emperor is Lord, because they would say the formula for the church was that Jesus Christ is the only Lord. And so when they refused to bend a knee, they were burned at the stake. They were fed to the lions. And so you never get a sense from any of the early church that this meant God would somehow had a hard time piecing them back together. Quite the opposite, that God can pull the atoms from anywhere he chooses exactly the way he chooses, the way he puts the universe in order. So I'm not concerned about cremation. There is a symbolic nature to laying someone to rest facing east, but it's purely symbolic. There's not a need for that. God will reassemble all those faithful early believers who were burned to death at the stake or who were fed to lions just as easily as he will pull together the gently laid to rest bodies of believers in very high-end cemeteries all over America today, which was foreign really to the early church. They did not have this kind of high-end burials that we do today. So cremation's not a problem. People tend to not like it because sometimes people tend to not like it because they don't like the idea of treating their loved ones, as it were, with what might be viewed by some as disrespect. But I really don't think that's an issue. And for some, they want to be cremated. They don't want to be buried in the ground and have people say, well, there they lay, because really that's where their body is, but they themselves are with their Lord. And so they're not there. They vacate that body. And so some people like cremation because it more marks the reality for them. I'm not here anymore. Don't come, hang out at the graveside and talk to me because I'm gone. I'm with my Savior. I think either way is fine, and it's a personal choice for each family, and nobody should feel guilty about cremation, and nobody should feel overly emphatic about burial. Within each family, there's freedom there. And then also I would say is that it's a choice for the family that remains as much as it is for the one that's being buried. Funerals are for the living, not the dead. The believer is in the presence of Christ, and honestly, does not care anymore. Okay, I know you know that philosophically and theologically. Sometimes in the midst of a funeral, that doesn't play out quite so cleanly. But just so we know that when a person dies, they're in the presence of Christ. They don't actually care what happens to their body. And God can piece it back together any old way he chooses. He's the creator of atoms themselves. He can do with atoms and the universe as he wishes.